Recently, the Daily Wire published a poll conducted by the Trafalgar Group showing that 65% of Democrat likely voters support what Trudeau has done to the freedom convoys. And what has he done? Well, frozen people's bank accounts, even single mothers who donated a mere $50 weeks ago when the protest was just truckers driving down the road. People have been trampled by horses. They've been beaten. One of the organizers is being denied bail on a mischief charge. Meanwhile, in other circumstances, we see violent rioters being let go. It's alarming when Trudeau and the Canadian government use emergency war powers to freeze the assets of political dissidents who are engaged in peaceful protest. And even more alarming in the US, when Democrat likely voters respond to a poll by saying, "We approve of those actions." Why? Because it is likely something will be coming here in a similar fashion. The U.S. convoy is going to be leaving from California in a few days, I believe, and heading to D.C. just in time for the State of the Union address from Joe Biden. In this tweet that I am showing on the screen from Jesse Kelly, he says, "We need a national divorce. We are the couple with no shared values living together. It's already ugly, and it only gets uglier from here. Let's get together, agree that it's not working, and find a way to divide up the assets and liabilities, the only peaceful path forward." It's scary because Jesse Kelly is not wrong, but I don't completely agree. When I say he's not wrong, it's because, well, he's giving his opinion on national divorce, but he's correct that we are individuals with no shared values, no shared worldview, no shared facts. The left, the establishment, they believe nonsense. They believe absolute nonsense. Of course, they'll tell you I'm the one who's wrong. They'll say you're the liar, and the far right. The Trayvon Martin story turned out to have been mostly not true. The story was that when he fought, this is the emergence of Black Lives Matter. He was holding George Zimmerman on the ground and doing what's called the ground pound. George Zimmerman was not a white man. He's Hispanic. The story of Michael Brown, hands up, don't shoot. That was a lie. It turns out, according to Obama's own Justice Department, he was actually charging forward and trying to take the gun from a cop. There are many of these stories. George Floyd. Turns out the initial reports that we got were mostly not true. Jacob Blake, the story that we got, mostly not true. And yes, even the Ahmaud Arbery story. As much as these far leftists don't want to hear it, it turns out the media narratives were all not true. Kyle Rittenhouse almost lost his life. I don't mean dying, I mean prison. He was almost placed in prison for the rest of his life over lies. Because he was defending his community. He was defending himself, namely. But he was trying to just provide medical support and security during violent riots from far-left extremists. Now, maybe you agree with those extremists. I certainly don't, which brings us to this position we're in. Freedom protesters engaging in peaceful, non-violent civil disobedience. And Democrat voters, according to this poll, overwhelmingly support the use of authoritarian, extreme wartime powers. Now I'll tell you why this is so worrying to me. Right now, Vladimir Putin is ordering 10,000 Russian military into the eastern region of Ukraine after saying that he formally recognizes the independence of eastern states. I really don't care all that much about an internal conflict in Ukraine. They're neighbors with Russia. I don't see why the U.S. is flying or sending troops to Eastern Europe. The 82nd Airborne, I believe, was deployed. At least that's what someone said. Fact check me on that one. Over what? Ukraine? What if Russia sent troops into Saskatchewan or into Ontario and said the protesters are requesting support? Or I should say, what if Russian troops were staging in just outside? I don't know. It's not a perfect analogy because there's many more countries in Eastern Europe. But the point is, the U.S. has very serious concerns with its own border. And then we have our own direct neighbor, Joe Biden, working with Trudeau, this authoritarian push. Yet our troops are going to Eastern Europe. Well, I'll tell you why I'm concerned with the national divorce line. Because there is a real prospect of regional war bubbling up into some greater conflict. Now, we hear World War III all the time. It's talked about every time there's a regional conflict. But if we do have a national divorce, then there's going to be some kind of World War III, or China just sweeps in and takes over whatever they want. Let's start with the news. And that news is DC deploying National Guard. The request from the establishment for the deployment of National Guard and panic over what's going to happen with the Freedom Convoy. And then we'll get into how Democrat voters feel about all of this. But before we get started, head over to timcast.com, become a member if you want to support this video, the work I do. And I mean it with the utmost sincerity. We really do need your support if we're going to expand. Every day we have activists trying to destroy our business by lying and manipulating because we are in some kind of cold civil war. They're coming after us. They absolutely are. But the good thing about it is that we have a resilient system that we've set up. And because you sign up as members, it's extremely difficult, nigh impossible for them to try to take us down. But they're trying. They absolutely are. Membership is how we keep this boat afloat. And your membership is greatly appreciated if you like the work we do. You'll get access to exclusive members-only segments in the Timcast IRL podcast. And most importantly, outside of any of that, you as a member, just know that every day that 30 cents or 20 cents or whatever it is you're giving per day to be a member, it's like $10 a month, is making sure our journalists can keep working. And they won't be able to stop us from reporting the truth and cutting through the BS. That being said, let's get into the big stories here. From Fox News, DC prepares for possible U.S. Freedom Convoy. Officials request National Guard troops. Tow trucks have been spotted near Washington, D.C.'s National Mall. Fox News reports as a so-called Freedom Convoy that converged on Ottawa and Canada last month was broken up by police over the weekend. D.C. appears to be preparing for thousands of truckers who plan to descend on the U.S. Capitol in coming days. State and local law enforcement have called in support from the National Guard in anticipation of the massive convoy in the D.C. area between late February and late March, a government source told Fox News on Tuesday. The truckers have requested a permit from the National Park Service to allow 1,000 to 3,000 to gather in the nation's capital, according to the source. National Guard troops will reportedly deploy beginning Tuesday and remain in place until the end of March. Pentagon Press Secretary John Kirby said in a statement that the police department has received a request for assistance from the U.S. Capitol Police and D.C. Homeland Security and Emergency Management Agency. Quote, those agencies have asked for National Guard personnel to provide support at traffic control points in and around the district to help the USCP and D.C. government address potential challenges stemming from possible disruptions at key traffic arteries, Kirby said. No decisions have been made yet to approve these requests. 2 tow trucks were spotted early Tuesday parked along D.C.'s National Mall at 7th and D and at 12th and C Street Southwest. The owner of the towing company told Fox News via phone that the city of D.C. hired them for public work that could last up to 10 days. The owner said they were specifically hired ahead of the trucking protest, and they've been instructed to clear any vehicles that illegally block the D.C. streets. He said they have no idea when the truckers might arrive. Now, in D.C., there are a couple bridges that allow entrance from the neighboring states into D.C., and there's fear that if the truckers block these bridges, they will cripple the D.C. area. I'm not a big fan of extreme disruption. I'm a fan of nonviolent civil disobedience. If you want to block a street, I also think that if you do, you get arrested for obstructing a roadway, you get a slap on the wrist and you carry on. So hopefully things remain calm and peaceful. The truckers can make their point. It looks like based on this permit, it's not even going to be like what happened in Ottawa. And I think that could be a good thing. I think driving across the country, getting to D.C., having a permit, staging a rally, maybe a little bit of nonviolent civil disobedience can help spread the word and send a message to these politicos that we, the people, we don't support the mandates, we don't support Joe Biden's failures, and we're going to get that message across. Here's how it works. You do something like this. The press picks it up. You do something like this. The police often overreact. It is a PR win. That's what happened in Ottawa. But the scary thing is, it won't matter at this point necessarily. Typically, a PR win is good when you have a cohesive society. But when Democrat voters overwhelmingly support extremist actions and emergency powers, I don't know if your message will actually accomplish anything. Because who are you trying to convince? The people who already agree with you? I think we're well past the army building phase of the culture war, and we're now in the active finger pointing phase. Propaganda, I think, is mostly becoming meaningless. And that's a scary thought. Because after that, things go hot. Now, before I get into what's happening with the polls and Democrats, I want to show you what else is happening in D.C. Capitol fence going up ahead of Biden's State of the Union as truckers plan D.C. protests. So they're locking down. The National Guard is reportedly going to be deployed. Fencing is going up. D.C. police will not tolerate what we saw in Ottawa. I believe that if the truckers do obstruct roadways, they'll be arrested immediately. Their trucks will be towed immediately. I don't think it'll be the same as what we saw in Ottawa with a few weeks of extended protest and obstruction. But that being said, the panic is real. And the scary thing is, it's actually happening. The panic and the fear isn't just in D.C. We have this story from Fox Baltimore. Maryland State Police monitoring cross-country trucker protests headed to D.C. next week. Because, of course, around D.C. is Virginia and Maryland. And that means with bridges and with the state borders surrounding the federal District of Columbia, there's going to be multi-agency monitoring of this. Everybody needs to stay peaceful. Everybody has they have their right to peaceful protest. Nonviolent civil disobedience is a bit different because often it borders on the illegal and then crosses into it. But I think, and I'll say it before, I'll say it again, whether you're Antifa or Black Lives Matter or Freedom Convoy truckers, if it's nonviolent civil disobedience, I support it. Not support it outright like your message. I support being nonviolent and saying we have issues we want addressed. Redress of grievances is in the First Amendment. But I also think you get your slap on the wrist arrest. So let it be said, I don't think people should just have the ability to disrupt everyone's lives indefinitely. But I believe we give certain leeway to disruption. Now, here's where I'm mostly worried about what we're seeing. And this poll really freaks me out, man, because I don't know what the answers are. And maybe Jesse Kelly is right. I don't want him to be right. I don't. I mean, he's right about the issues, but do we need a national divorce? I do not believe there is any circumstance where the states break up and it ends peacefully. Impossible. Because even if the U.S. breaks apart and the two parent factions agree, okay, we're going to divide up assets and resources, then China comes in. Majority of Democrats back Trudeau's crackdown, freezing bank accounts of truckers. This is insane. Even Vosh, a socialist YouTuber, spoke out against this. Stephen Marsh, who wrote the book The Next Civil War, who said he favors the multicultural democracy and not the constitutional republic of the United States, also called this martial law. But I warn you now, this poll, at the very least, maybe it's not accurate. I hope it's not. Majority of Democrats back what Trudeau has done. Overt fascism. And I'm going to outright say it. It is, in every sense of the word, fascistic. Now, if you want to argue the nitty-gritty of what fascism is academically, okay, fine. What I'm saying is, in the colloquial sense of the power of the absolute authority of the state, plus the lucrative merger of corporate powers with state powers, you're looking at it, baby. You are looking at it. You can call it communism, whatever. I don't think it matters what we call it. It's here. The Daily Wire reports. A new poll from Trafalgar Group and Convention of States Action shows that 55% of likely general election voters disapprove of Trudeau's handling of the protesters. 35% approve of Trudeau's heavy-handed tactics, and 10% said they were unaware of what was happening north of the border. Now, hold on there a minute. 55% of likely election voters disapprove. It's good news. It shows that the sane and rational individual, and for the most part, anti-authoritarians, are in the majority. However, when you isolate Democrats, aside from Democrats, the only other demographic areas identified in the poll that cut in Trudeau's favor are ages 65 and older. I'm sorry, let me read. Democrats overwhelmingly favored Trudeau's response, with 65% approval to 17% disapproval. Republican responses were weighted even more heavily against Trudeau, with 87% of likely GOP voters disapproving to only 8% approving. Respondents who said they did not belong to either one of the two main parties cut against Trudeau. 74% of independent voters said they did not approve. So there's the divide here. Independents and Republicans in stark opposition to Trudeau. Democrats overwhelmingly favoring it. It's good news in a sense, but the Democrats are the largest political faction, the largest political party. So they're at 65%. This means when you add them all together, 45% of this country favors the emergency powers and the extreme and brutal purge and beatdown of these individuals. in Canada. So maybe we're not going to be able to handle this. I don't know. Seeing what's going on. Let me show you. Let me show you. Fox News. Canadian protesters' truck seized. Bank accounts frozen over connection to Freedom Convoy. Derek Brower said he doesn't know where his truck is or what happened to it. I'll tell you what's really scary. There's this photo. It's an aerial shot. And it shows a farm, maybe about 100 kilometers from Ottawa. There's a bunch of trucks there. And people are posting saying that the Freedom Convoy insurrectionists are staging for a resurgence. And I look at this and I'm like, or maybe it's just a parking lot. Or maybe it's a bunch of trucks that are in disrepair. I don't know. But isn't it crazy? The freak out. That truckers are parked not too far away. Maybe they're the ones who didn't go to the city. Maybe they're part of the convoy and they said, we're not going to go into the city. You don't know. That's how insane things are getting. Take a look at this. Derek Brower, Canadian truck driver who attended the Freedom Convoy in Ottawa, said his bank accounts have been frozen and his truck was seized. On America's Newsroom Monday, Brower said his personal account, his trucking account, and a third unrelated account, a business account, were all frozen over the weekend. He also doesn't know where his truck is or what happened to it. It comes after nearly 200 protesters were arrested. Almost 100 vehicles were towed. Quote, since then, I haven't heard anything from the government, Brower told Bill Hemmer. Robert Dorian, a civil engineering technician in Canada, said on Fox and Friends that police were extremely rough. We only wanted the mandates to be lifted because they go against our constitutional rights. And this evolved into something different that the government seemed to have already planned. He believes Trudeau invoked the emergency measure because police were unable to provoke protesters to violence. He said the government's move to freeze protesters' assets is very dangerous. Any government being able to freeze assets as they wish, if you're not doing things they want, in my opinion, is far from being democratic and is not what Canada stands for. Brower said he doesn't know what's going to happen with his accounts. Basically, the bank, they shut it down, and I haven't been contacted by anybody. Brower said he doesn't know what will come of the Freedom Convoy protest, but he doesn't believe it's over. It seems like many of them are gearing up for even more. Take a look at this from timcast.com. Ottawa mayor wants to sell trucks seized from Freedom Convoy protest, claims Emergency Act gives him the authority. These people are insane and evil. The establishment lies. Democrat voters blindly march in lockstep with the lies. I don't know how we rectify this. All of these stories we heard over the past 10 years from Black Lives Matter and Antifa, lies. And then what they do is they use terror tactics to force companies to try and cut off your revenue streams. They try and shut you down because they are evil, evil people. They want civil war. They do. During Occupy Wall Street, many of these extremists said, from the ashes of the old, we will build anew. They want the conflict because it destroys the Constitution, our founding documents, rips the country in half, and gives an opportunity to the extremists to replace this country with something evil. They're evil. And I don't mean they are evil, but it is their possessive evil. You're talking to Larry Sharp, Libertarian candidate for governor last night on timcast.rl, and he said, the peasants, the Russian peasants, they had years of this horrible living. So they said, well, the communists can't be worse, can they? Little did they know how wrong they were. These evil individuals, they want power. They see people like Elon Musk and Bezos, and they say, I want that power. They don't want to earn it. They want to take it. I guess you can say in their mind, they believe might is right, which is very fascistic. So in their minds, it is earning it. If they can seize it, it's theirs because in their mind, they believe might, according to their ideology, makes right. Scary, isn't it? Take a look at this. Speaking to the government-funded Canadian Broadcasting Corporation over the weekend, Watson initially claimed that he believes selling the trucks would help recoup some of the cost of the city. I have asked our solicitor and our city manager how we can keep the tow trucks and the campers and the vans and everything else that we've confiscated and sell those pieces of equipment to help recoup some of the costs that our taxpayers are absorbing. So that's one of the provisions of the Emergency Act. And we have been a beneficiary of the Emergency Act. Watson later admitted he does not want to return the trucks because he does not think the protesters deserve to have them back. I want to see them sold. I don't want them returned to these people who've been causing such frustration and angst in our community. You can't come to Ottawa anymore and shut down our city for 4 weeks. It's really amazing how these politicians think they can destroy your life. But when you disrupt their lives, they will brutally stomp down on your neck with their boot. Things are getting crazy up there, man. There were rumors circulating for a while that the banks were freaking out. A potential Canadian bank run, or that the banks would freeze your assets and expand these powers, which they seem to be doing, and that it would rock confidence in these institutions. So you better get your money out. Let me show you this from TikTok. Over on TikTok, Henry Timmons posts a clip from Jordan Peterson. Take your money out of banks, buy gold, silver, or Bitcoin if you can while you can. In this clip, Jordan Peterson says that he was advised by a military source to get his money out of the banks because it is worse than you realize. I don't know if I believe it. I mean, I believe that Jordan Peterson was told this. I believe this gentleman who told him it believes it. But is it really that bad the system will collapse? I'm not entirely convinced, to be completely honest. I'm not entirely convinced. I believe it is bad. I don't think the system will collapse outright. I don't think it will just one day just fall apart. But maybe. As they describe, gradually, then suddenly, right? Slowly, then suddenly, or gradually, then suddenly. It's entirely possible that the system is strained to such a degree, and we all have an optimism bias and a normalcy bias as such, we won't see it coming. Take a look at this story from Timcast. Liberal Canadian MP asserted during a floor speech that honk honk is an acronym for a statement in support of Nazis. Let's just put it that way. The HH, as it were. It's absolutely insane where we are. But when you see something like this, perhaps then you start to realize maybe Jesse Kelly is right. And I hope he's not. I feel that if this country splits, here's what will happen. He says we need a national divorce, divide up our assets peacefully. He's correct about that last part. If we have a national divorce without first negotiating assets, civil war will happen. But I got to say, even if we do, divide up assets and liabilities, there will still be fighting. California relies on the Colorado River for their water. What happens when when California fractures between red and blue? What happens when states split apart from states? And then what happens? States split apart from themselves. In the first Civil War, Virginia, capital of the Confederacy, Richmond, I believe. West Virginia says, we out. West Virginia split off from Virginia because they did not want to leave the Union and they did not want to support slavery. It's a little bit more complicated than all of that, but I'm trying to simplify it. If we have a peaceful divorce, who's to say that Illinois stays Illinois? Southern Illinois is as red as they come. It's only Chicago that's blue. The same is true for most states. Most of the people live in New York City, in New York, right? So why would upstate New York support New York City? Or I should say most people live in the cities. I believe it's not most people in New York City. Why would the red areas agree to live under the boot of these blue areas? They won't. See, this is why civil war breaks out. In the past, you had, the South was very rural. And so the South was mostly in agreement with itself. Some people have pointed out, and I think it's fair to say, that the South was fighting to defend their homes. Unfortunately, that meant upholding the institution of slavery. And there you go. Whether intentionally or not. I think it's fair to say that the Confederate soldiers weren't going out there cheering on the idea of slavery. They were just saying, I'm fighting in a war for my homeland or my state or whatever. But I think it's obvious that was actively supporting slavery. So here's why I bring that up. These people were like, this state is my home. In most civil wars, you have rural areas that are more traditional or conservative and urban areas that are more progressive. You can take a look at the early 1900s, Spain. You had traditionalist, fascist areas and urban, progressive, communist areas. So what would happen in the U.S. in the event of a national divorce? Well, blue cities will immediately decree psychotic authoritarianism, like we've already seen. They support what Trudeau is doing. The red suburbs will say no. And then what? The red suburbs will cut off supplies to the big cities. The red suburbs will likely be more in alignment, not completely, with the rural areas, and the cities will be isolated. But cities have resources, a lot of them, and a lot of people. So they'll fight and then try to take control of the suburbs. There's no easy way out. You know, when we talk about stuff like this, I see a future that there's no avoiding it. The Democrats believe in the power of Trudeau. They don't care. Not all of them, but most of them. They don't care about why. They don't care about what happens. They just want you to suffer. They say the same thing about Republicans. But let's break down the lies, okay? Conservative individuals live in rural areas. Take me, for instance. I am certainly not aligned with these Democrats. I don't consider myself a Republican. I'm more libertarian, if anything. Libertarian center. Slightly left-leaning a little bit on economic issues. I left the cities. I left the suburban areas because I don't want to infringe upon anybody else. I just want to be left alone. And that tends to be whatever the right is. The left infringes. The left wants to take your guns away so they can feel safe. The left wants to ban your speech so they don't have to hear it. I don't care if you have guns. I'll live by myself. I don't care what opinions you have. I'll go off and mind my own business. And therein lies the core argument, the core issue. How is there a path forward when one side seeks to oppress and crush the other, and the other side just wants to be left alone? That's why I feel like war is inevitable. That's why I feel like they're evil and they want you to suffer. They think they know what's best for you. Watch the show Peacemaker. Spoiler alert, maybe a little spoiler alert. If you haven't seen the show, I recommend it, but here's a little minor spoiler. I'm not going to reveal too much. The bad guys in Peacemaker are the Democratic establishment. It's funny, isn't it? They try and claim that the main character in the show is a fascist. And he kind of is. Yeah. It's weird, isn't it? The show's really good. The main character, Peacemaker, and this is an important point, right? I know a lot of people might say, like, what does pop culture have to do with this? No. Pop culture reflects, the writing of the show reflects where we are. The bad guys in the show think that they're smarter than everyone else, and thus they should control everyone. Peacemaker, the main character, doesn't agree with that, but kills anyone who opposes peace because he's fascistic. They call him, what do they call him? A proto-fascist libertarian. I thought it was hilarious because it really does describe him. He doesn't like authority, but he's also willing to kill jaywalkers because they disturb the peace. He's not a good dude. It's weird. It's a weird show. John Cena does a great job. But it's really interesting to me to watch a show like that and see that they made the Democratic establishment out to be the bad guys. Just coming out and saying that they're smarter than you, they know better than you, they should be controlling your life. And that's what happens with people like Trudeau, people like Joe Biden, not people like Donald Trump. When the cities were burning, Donald Trump did not call in the National Guard. But DC is now calling in the National Guard over truckers. Y'all need to wake up if you're not paying attention. I think most of you are. Let me stress that point. Donald Trump did not call in the military over the riots. Billions of dollars in damage. DC they didn't bring in the National Guard on January 6th when Trump actually requested it. Truckers, here they come. After Joe Biden's inauguration, here they come. Black Lives Matter and Antifa, sorry. To be fair, in Ferguson, the National Guard did get deployed under Obama. But now, what are we seeing? They'll put the boot on your neck. So I hope conservatives are waking up to what's happening. This is why I've been saying abolish the police. Cops in Canada, and that's Canada, it's not the US, are gloating and laughing. They literally were laughing at the horse trampling an elderly woman. What did she do? Just some little old lady coming out to protest. Meanwhile, in Portland, armed Antifa extremists engage in a shootout with a local homeowner. And now Antifa is waging a disinformation campaign, purposefully trying to obfuscate what really happened. They tampered with evidence. They manipulated the crime scene because they're evil. Suppose some people will argue evil is subjective, but here I don't think it is. I think it's clear that they seek to impose their will upon you by force. And I think that's evil. Selfishness, the desire to steal and seize and destroy. It's evil. Dark days ahead, man. Maybe we can pull out of this. But as I've been saying for the past several years, I think civil war is inevitable. It scares me to see that Democrats support what Trudeau is doing. How do you even talk to these people? When they say, I don't care about what's right. I don't care about what's true. What are you supposed to do? These people don't care about what's right. They don't care about what's true. They don't care about you. They just want to feel power. Man, that's it. That's why they march around with guns, shutting down streets. That's why they kill people, and they've killed so many in the past couple of years. Oath keepers haven't done that, but they'll lie, cheat, and steal, and they'll smear. They'll lock you up in solitary. These truckers, I hope they realize what's going to happen. They will lock you up and put you in as an insurrectionist. So be careful. I hope we can pull through these dark days, but I'm just not confident. I will add, though, in the end, I don't think it's the end of the world. I think whatever happens here may be bad, but the night is always darkest before the dawn. I think after this period of strife, I believe it will come to a great conflict, and then I believe afterwards we'll prosper. We will. Maybe it will be a great national divorce, some fighting, but ultimately we split. We'll see. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up tonight at 8 p.m. over at youtube.com/TimCastIRL. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all then.